There is no Antimemetics division. Part 2. In the first part of this story, we were introduced to Marion Wheeler, head of the Antimemetics division at the Foundation, a division that is routinely forgotten about by even the O5s due to the nature of their work, researching and containing anomalies that actively force themselves out of people's memory. Most anomalies don't really want to be contained, but these resist containment in a way that makes most people unaware that they even exist. And they only get worse from here. Let's take a look. Chapter 3. Unforgettable. That's what you are. Lynn Marness is more than 90 years old and hasn't stood at his full height in 10. He was a tower of a man in his prime, 2 meters tall and built like a boxer. Nearly nobody he ever met was able to look him straight in the eye, at least not and tell him no. Illness has gradually eaten away at that over the years. He feels as if he lives at the bottom of a deep bath, everybody he ever meets looking down at him from slippery, unscalable walls, none of them able to reach down to help him. He spent his final months crumpled up in bed like a dying spider, changing to a corpse's color ahead of time. It might have been bearable if he'd lost his mind, but he remembers what he used to be. A leader, a powerhouse. He used to be able to alter the course of terrible events for the better, to get justice. He used to protect people. A voice tells him that it's finished, and that he can wake up now. But there's a warm wind through his thin, colorless hair, and there's direct sunlight coming down on him now, and the heat is filling him up like a tonic. He's outside. It's been too long since he was last outside. When he opens his eyes, he sees his lake, the one in the northwest which he used to have all to himself every summer. He's on a boat. His boat, lying on a blanket laid on the deck. A few kilometers away behind them is the little lake house, empty. It's perfect. He didn't know he had the strength left to safely leave the hospital, let alone travel this far. But if he'd put his mind to it and selected a final moment, this might have been it. The voice asks if he remembers her, and Marness looks, with eyes which are strengthening. The woman speaking is seated on the deck beside him, attentive. She has a large plastic box full of medical supplies open in front of her, and a light suit jacket laid on the deck beside it, and she has her sleeves rolled up so she can work. As he watches, she carefully disposes of a needle. A dim memory surfaces and starts taking shape. The woman is twice as old now as when he knew her last, and visibly twice as confident. It would be difficult to forget her. He taught her everything he could remember at the time. He remembers her as a field agent. He remembers sending her through hell a fistful of times. Marion. The woman softly explains to him that he died, surrounded by grieving family. They loved him very much, and they cried over him. The funeral for the fake is in a few days, but unfortunately he won't be able to see it himself. He's dead now, and this is what comes next. Marness calls her Marion Hutchinson, and he feels gold spreading through his bones. Miracle juice. It's Wheeler now, but she doesn't correct him. She says that when he retired from the Foundation, they did what they do to all of them who retire, what all of them agree to when they sign up. They gave him some medicine which made him forget. As he stepped out of the door for the last time, all the work he did for them, great work which saved lives, evaporated away, and his cover story sealed over those years became reality. That's why he spent his whole retirement believing that he was a former section chief at the FBI. It's what he wanted, it's what they wanted, and it's what he agreed to. But he alone agreed to something else as well, and he must be starting to remember now what that was. She's injected him with a serum which throws the human aging process into hard reverse, and it affects everything: organs, tissues, memories. He'll be coming up on it soon, and she asks if he remembers. He croaks, yes, dizzy. She continues, saying that he signed over his final 12 hours to them. He asked for a full and happy and well-deserved retirement, but now, for the last day, he works for them again, because of one particular job. She has it in writing here, and asks if he recognizes his signature and hers. He does. She asks if he remembers who he is, and he says Dr. Lynn Patrick Marness of the Foundation, Antimemetics Division founder. She smiles with relief, as it's good to see him again. She explains that they need some memories from him, memories which nobody else in the world has access to, and which are buried so deeply that they can't extract them without killing him. This afternoon, that's what they're going to do. They're going to extract those memories, and once they're done, he'll be dead. Marness has already begun to regress to the time when he himself set this wheel in motion. He remembers, very clearly, discovering the mystery in his own head, the blank spots which he couldn't explain, and couldn't safely access with any kind of chemical or physical technique. He remembers deferring the mystery until now. Marion then asks him what happened in 1976. Marness sits up, his skin beginning to clear and his breathing is improving. He feels as if his brain is cleaved in two by a wormhole, such that his eyes are focusing on different time periods. In his right eye, he sees the lake and the boat he's dying on. In his left, he sees a collage of electrifyingly familiar past faces and places. Bart Hughes, with his grin and thick glasses and baby face, looking like some kid dressed up as a Foundation researcher. The original Site-48 crew. Great techs, but a hopeless excuse for a softball team. Young Marion, with steel-strong nerves and a mind like a laser. Suits and lab coats and MTF operatives. And everywhere paperwork and floods of serial numbers. He starts to speak. 1976 was the year he founded the division. He brainstormed the whole thing in one legendary week, hammering out the science and then distilling the first chemical nestic with the help of a hand-picked trio of assistants, the first antimemetics researchers. No antimemetic SCPs had ever been observed up to that point. The entire operation was a shot in the dark, and yet the team immediately struck gold. Passive black holes of information, active predatory infovores, unrememberable worms which covered the human skin like dust mites, contagious bad news, self-sealing secrets, living murders, Chinatowns. Marion wonders if there might be something more serious awry with Marness's head. His version of events is hopelessly romantic. In Marion's experience, nobody looks back on Foundation work fondly. Marness says that it was all too fast. Special containment procedures take time to develop, much more time than he took. The Foundation as a whole acquires about a dozen new SCPs annually, and he found that many in 1 year, essentially single-handedly. It was too easy, as if he knew it all already, and was just catching up. And then one day, he realized that he couldn't remember his life before Antimemetics. He knew he'd been a Foundation operative for decades prior. That was where he got the authority to start his own division, but there was nothing else there. It was a wall in his mind, which even Nestics couldn't get him past. He went to the paper archives and looked at his own personnel file. Marness trails off, not because he's forgotten what to say next. It's deliberate. The trailing off is exactly what happened. He woke up back at his desk half a working day later, remembering nothing. He went through the loop a dozen times before someone realized what was happening and broke him out of it. Marion knows all of this. The file still exists, and the antimemetic effect still clouds the back half of it. All of this would be over in a second if any of that back half could be read. Marness goes on, saying that when he assembled the evidence, what he found was a hole. like a jigsaw with only the edges and corners. So he did the only thing he could do. He looked at the shape of the hole, and together with Bart Hughes and others, he formed a theory. This was not the first Antimemetics division. Before 1976, there was another one. He was part of that division, and he possibly led it. Certainly, he is the only known survivor of it. Something happened to that team. Some anti-memetic force chewed up and swallowed the idea of the Antimemetics division itself. He was let off lightly. He lived. The rest of those people, whoever they were, however many of them there were, are missing without trace. Marion nods and says that this much they already know. She was there when he wrote the note. The question is known, but it's the answer that they can't get to without killing him. It's the answer that they've waited all these years to get at. She's here to ask him, what happened? Marness covers his right eye and grimaces, trying. He fails. It's not there. She hasn't sent him back far enough. There's still that wall there in his head. He remembers why the question exists, but he doesn't remember the answer. He needs more. Marion swabs his arm and gives him another 10 years. Editor's note. We're told in a footnote that Class X Nestics were a failed eternal youth serum, rejuvenating both mind and body up to a triple-digit number of years, but the effects are temporary, wearing off in a matter of hours. Furthermore, as the drug wears off, the suppressed time reasserts itself all at once, causing a harmful whiplash effect on the subject's physiology. Rejuvenation up to 30 days is safe, but past that it becomes dangerous, and anything more than 16 to 18 months is always fatal. Its main use, therefore, has become its restorative effect on human memory, allowing Foundation operatives to accurately recall incidents involving memory-corrupting entities. This is why Marness is going to die today. Marness seems like another man once the second X dose takes effect. Wrinkles are sliding back up into his face. Muscle mass is returning to his limbs, but it takes Marion a second to realize the real reason why. She just boosted him back across the field desk-agent transition. Marness has regressed a little way past senior management, the realm where most problems were solved by saying the correct words, and into a time where he survived through physical fitness, situational alertness, and hands-on experience. Marness gets to his feet for the first time in years. He scans his surroundings, examining the placid, golden lake and the sky and the boat itself. He doesn't sit down again. He smooths down his hospital gown, wishing he had a sweater and, separately, some fishing gear. He brushes a hand through new, old hair. His sideburns are back. He says that they weren't Foundation at first. The first Antimemetics division was a U.S. Army project. It ran parallel with Manhattan during World War II. They called themselves the Unthinkables. It began as an experiment in advanced propaganda. The objective was to cut through the physical conflict and find a way to rupture the ideological machine, to obliterate the idea of Nazism. After 2 years, enough theory had been developed that the task had been reduced to an engineering problem. Another 2 years, and the engineering problem had been reduced as well, and what they had built was a very special kind of bomb. Unfortunately, they didn't understand what they'd built. Back then, they didn't have the nestics or the shielding that they could use to protect themselves. They didn't understand how far ahead you need to think when you're working with this kind of technology. They got looped. It was textbook. They built the unthinkable bomb and test detonated it, and it worked perfectly. The bomb destroyed itself and erased its own successful detonation, and flattened all the knowledge which had gone together to build it. They forgot that they had ever built the bomb at all, and started over. To their credit, they realized pretty quickly what must have happened. There was a 4-year gap in their progress now, and there was no other way to explain it. But by the time they put the pieces together the second time, The war was almost over. The Nazis had been defeated by conventional means, and the Japanese had been broken by the first atomic bombings. So they completed the second antimemetic bomb, and after that, they sat on it. Marion is silent for a long moment, before doubtfully saying that the US Army was secretly developing antimemetic weaponry as early as the 1940s. Marness replies that they sure were, with more than a hint of pride. Marion says that, of course, there's no one in the whole world who could back this up. Marness agrees, flashing a smile he hasn't flashed in decades. She only has his word for it. This is why she resurrected him, for the sake of one more good war story. Marion replies that she resurrected him because she wants a very specific question answered, although she can see in a way that he's already answered it. The old Antimemetics division bombed themselves, somehow. From context, she assumes that they knew what they were doing that time. She assumes it was not an accident. Marness says that it was not. After the war, the second bomb collected dust for years. They began sketching improved designs for a third bomb, but around that time, oversight was starting to flicker out. They completed their research and production objectives and were given no further objectives. Funding became shaky and they couldn't figure out why. It wasn't entirely clear that the project overseers knew what they were doing, or even that they remembered they existed. It was a side effect from the research, of course, one they had no way of managing at the time. In 1951, a cult movement began in Ojai, California. It was wrong. Everything about it was just wrong. In a matter of days, it was a national phenomenon and still growing. It was all over the news. To spread that far in months would have been credible, but days was simply impossible. The team could see that the philosophy behind the cult was unnaturally contagious. It was the opposite of unthinkable. It was unforgettable. They knew that this was what their bomb was designed for. They prompted the overseers for direction, but there were no orders. At the time that the outbreak began, they were a US Army laboratory, through and through. 8 days into the crisis, the Foundation acquired them. All the classified research, all the material resources, and all the compliant top staff, including him. Anybody who wouldn't comply was mind-wiped and sent back to the Army. 20 hours after the acquisition, they deployed the second bomb, and the cult was gone. Nobody remembered it. Nobody remembered being part of it. 0 loss of life. A completely clean detonation. Editor's note. This is referring to the Fifthus and SCP-1425, star signals, which would again resurge in 2005 in Ojai, California. Seems that the antimemetic bomb didn't quite snuff all that out. After that is when everything really kicked off. Once they started working for the Foundation, the pace of research ramped up. Every new technological advancement uncovered new hidden SCPs. He passed the Foundation field exams and went out catching ghosts. His life turned into the Twilight Zone. He then blinks hard, covers one of his eyes, then the other. He remembers all these different people now, and it feels like his memory is in stereo. Almost every antimemetic SCP they caught before the wipe in 76, they caught again soon after the wipe. That means he remembers 2 acquisition logs for each one. He remembers 2 antimemetics teams, and he doesn't remember who belongs on which side of the wall. He asks if she remembers Goldie Yarrow, the neurologist, or Dr. Ojibiru, or Julie Still. She just tells him that this is important, and asks if he's at the right place in his own timeline to remember what happened yet. Marness focuses, and he discovers that he is. Something changes in his eyes as he stops reminiscing. He speaks more slowly now, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. There is an SCP which her division has never seen, he says. The SCP which his division couldn't contain. The escapee. This is what she wanted, isn't it? She replies yes. This is the data she's killing him for. She leaves a gap where, if she felt there was anything to apologize for, she would apologize. Marness locks eyes with her. It was eating his division alive. It came at them so hard and so fast that the only way they could stop it was to self-destruct, but they had no on-site nuke. And in retrospect, it is obvious to him, now, that this was because the SCP had consumed their site nuke first of all. If you know it exists, it knows you exist. The more you know about it, the more it knows about you. If you can see it can see you, and you can see it. She's been looking right at it all afternoon. Marion is suddenly acutely aware of her surroundings. There are only 2 of them on the boat. The boat is anchored more than a kilometer from any of the lake shores. She hasn't brought any backup with her. There's a radioactive prickling in her brain. Red flag. Why didn't she bring any backup with her? That doesn't make any sense. There should be a team at the lake house. There should be an MTF operative and a medic here on the boat with her, and a second boat at minimum. Is she all alone out here? Why did she do that? She pulls her gun, but she doesn't aim it at Marness yet. She asks him where it is, and if it's in him. Marness's voice is becoming urgent, and he covers both of his eyes again. He says that destroying all knowledge of it was the only way to destroy it, and restoring his memories was a foolproof way to bring it back. It's in his eye, she thinks. Most likely his left eye. Marion backs up to the other side of the boat, draws a bead on the center of Marness's head, and asks if he's still in there. Marness hisses that there's a way to fix this, and drops to his knees. He keeps his eyes screwed up and gropes his way forward blindly, on his hands and knees. She tells him that he needs to tell her what this thing is, but he replies that that's the opposite of what they need to do. She needs to set another bomb off. She begins to say that they don't have that bomb, as they lost that technology, but he cuts her off to say that they've always had it. There's an engineering lab in Site 41, an underground complex the size of a football field, in pristine condition and totally disused. That's where their bomb's installed. Marion argues that that just sets them back to square one. If she sets the bomb off, how do they contain this thing? Marness shouts that they won't, ever. They can't. The whole division is looped. They start the division, they run headlong into this thing, and either it eats them or they wipe themselves out in self-preservation. The idea of anti-memes is as old as forgetfulness itself. Humans have been looping through this problem over and over again since long before the 40s, maybe for centuries. His blindly probing fingers find the medical box, but it's too late. A waving black pedipalp coated in dark hairs forces its way out through Marness's left eye, and he screams. Still on his knees, he grasps it with both hands and tries to break it, but it's solid, as if it has bones inside it. Marion shouts at him, asking what the escapee is, as that can't be the whole story. She asks where it's from, what it wants. Can it reason? Can it speak? Marness just utters the word help before a second spider leg, significantly longer and spindlier, slides out through his trachea, ruining his throat and voice box and producing a gout of blood. He gurgles as a third leg shoots from his abdomen like a spear. Marion shoots him in the head, and he falls forward, limp, before rising back up, lifted by the 3 spider appendages as if he is a puppet being controlled by something gigantic and invisible. His arms raise as if suspended by wires. Marion squints and fires 4 more shots over Marness's head at the likely body mass of the invisible puppeteer, and fires the rest of her clip almost directly into the sky. The whole boat vibrates along with the surface of the lake, as if responding to infrasound or a localized earthquake. Then the boat shudders violently and starts to lift out of the water, raised by more unseen appendages. Marion holsters her gun and goes for the medical box herself, pulling it away from Marness's floating feet. There's a compartment with Class B amnestic, the fast-acting stuff, in serum form. She does a hurried burst of mental arithmetic, measures out the correct dosage in a syringe, and, hands shaking, plunges it into a wrist vein. The boat is still rising. Whatever the monster is, it's colossally tall, or maybe it flies. She is, of course, already dosed up to the eyeballs with nestic drugs. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to perceive any of this. Foundation medical literature warns in the strongest possible terms against putting both kinds of drugs into the same brain. Best case scenario, this ends with her in the hospital. They're 30 meters up in the air now, 10 stories. There's a stabbing pain developing in her left eye. She kicks her shoes off and throws the gun away. She goes to the edge and contemplates the drop for a disbelieving second. She jumps. It takes 2 heart-stopping seconds of freefall for her to hit the water. The chilled hammer blow of the impact is enough to blank her mind out. By the time she surfaces, she doesn't remember where she fell from, or why. And likewise, the skyscraper-sized being which claimed Marness in the boat has forgotten about her. What the hell, she gasps. There's nothing above her, no explanation. Only the symptoms of the drug cocktail give her any indication of what just happened. A sensation like hundreds of tiny lumps of hot solder in her brain, and pain and exhaustion spreading to all of her tendons. She wants to die. Swim, says part of her. Get to shore first, then you can die. The extraction team finds her around dusk, unconscious on the lake shore. They stabilize her in the helicopter, then take her to Site 41 for examination and to have her system flushed. She spends a solid 8 days at home, detoxifying. No nestics, no amnestics, no exposure to dangerous memory-corrupting SCPs, no work visitors. No work, the doctor also tells her, pointlessly. It isn't anywhere near the first missing event in her life, nor is she the first person in the Antimemetics staff to have such an experience, but the sensation is no less disturbing for its familiarity. As per procedure, she writes a report summarizing everything she can remember. The gap in her memory is about 13 hours. Then she adds her report to the extensive, complex map of missing time which the whole division maintains collectively. It is a map of holes, and the map is becoming large enough that very faint patterns are gradually forming. The outline of an enemy is becoming visible, or perhaps a group of enemies. When she quizzes the extraction team later, none of them remember who activated the emergency beacon which summoned them. In fact, the beacon itself cut out long before they landed at the lake. Marion compares the current size of her division with her best estimate of what it should be. Maybe she needs a few more key people here and there. So, assuming the division was fully staffed before the event, maybe those empty roles are the people who died this time around. Maybe one of them activated the beacon. A commendable act by someone now only known to exist because of that single act. It's weeks later still that Marion discovers the largest new hole in her memory. Who founded the division? When? Chapter 4. Case Colorless Green. Item Number: SCP-3125. Object Class: Keter. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-3125 is kept inside Cognitohazard Containment Unit 3125 on the first floor of Site 41. This containment unit is a 10 meter by 15 meter by 3 meter cuboidal room, clad in layers of lead, soundproofing, and telepathic shielding. Access is through an airlock system at one end of the containment unit. This airlock is programmed to allow only one person to enter the containment unit at a time, and to remain locked until this person exits before allowing another person to enter. Under no circumstances may any coherent information be allowed to leave the containment unit. This includes written and electronic notes, photographs, audio and video recordings, sound, electromagnetic and particle-based signals, and psi emanations. During the exit cycle, a purge system rigged to the airlock flushes the occupant's memory by flooding the airlock with amnestic gas for 3 minutes. A senior Antimemetics Division staff member must visit SCP-3125 every 6 weeks. End of file. Paul Kim incredulously asks if that's the whole entry. Marion confirms that that's the whole entry. It isn't even the 50th strangest thing Paul Kim has seen in the database, but still, no description, no acquisition report, no test log, no addenda, no clue who built the unit, or when, or how many times it's been visited, or who carried out the previous visits, or what they took in with them, or how long they were in there. Marion replies that obviously Bart Hughes built the unit, and this cannot be denied. The man's signature style of containment architecture is recognizable a mile out. Sleek, white, plainly impregnable without the aid of extremely heavy tools. That makes it at least 7 years old, so 60 visits or more. She guesses there are good reasons for the rest of those omissions. The timer watchdog says it's time again. Kim doesn't like the idea of her routinely exposing herself to a cognito hazard so dangerous that they can't even write the reason why they can't write it down. Especially because it's impossible for them to recover any usable information this way. She's going to go in, be incommunicado for 2 hours, and come out a smiling amnesiac. What do they gain from that? It's just a breach risk. Marion hears every word of this and elects to ignore it all. There's a vague shape of familiarity about the entry as written. There are a few word choices which reassure her in an intangible way that it was written by someone who knew what they were doing. Possibly her. Kim continues, saying that they should just scrub that last line from the database entry. There can't be anything good in that room. Marion puts her keycard in the slot, and the airlock rewards her with green LEDs, beginning to cycle open. It's built as a slender, vertical cylinder with a single opening. The entire thing rotates on its axis. Inside, there's barely room for a single person to stand without their shoulders touching the walls. Kim asks her what she's taking, and she turns to face him and shrugs, replying, "A stick of gum." Kim tells her that he can get her field gear as the airlock begins to rotate again, emitting a low, quiet thrum solely as an audible warning that there is machinery in motion. They can raid the inventory, and if she'll give him 15 minutes, they'll turn her into a one-woman war. If Marion says anything in response to this, it's cut off by the soundproofing as the airlock rotates. Kim is left alone in the antechamber. He stares at the outer door for a worried moment. He presses his ear to the door for a while, but hears nothing. Not even a faint tremble from the airlock mechanism. Inside, it's pitch dark for a few seconds. Then some unseen sensor detects Marion's presence and brings the fluorescents up. Half of them anyway, as the others remain inert or flicker aggravatingly. The room's interior walls are made from milky white glass, bulletproof, knowing hues, and plastered with paperwork, taped and blue-tacked up in vaguely coherent masses. Where there is no paperwork, people have drawn directly on the walls in marker pen. There is a conference table, long and elliptical, covered with more paperwork and a tangle of laptop computers and serpentine power supply cables. Power has returned to the machines and they are slowly booting. A data projector warms up and shines a map of the world over the far wall, almost lining up with a network of scribbled annotations on the same wall. Post-it notes of all colors litter the carpet like autumn leaves. Other than that, the room is empty. Skimming the paperwork, Marion discovers that nearly all of it is handwritten, and most of it charts the progress of conversations. Most of the entries are dated and signed, and most of the dates are weeks apart. The conversations are panicked and fearful back and forths about dozens of SCPs, some of them antimemetic in nature, but none of them obviously related to one another. None of the notes mention SCP-3125. The only name Marion recognizes is her own, which appears on 1 in 10 or 20 of the notes. The notes seem authentic, and the handwriting is hers, but her notes also seem as desperate and uncertain in tone as everybody else's. This unnerves her. There are diagrams on the walls, too, which are too complex to decode at a glance, but complex enough to make her eyes hurt to look at them. Still lost for a logical entry point to the data, she curses all of her predecessors. Asynchronous research, whereby the research topic is forgotten entirely between iterations and rediscovered over and over, is a perfectly standard practice in the Antimemetics division, and her people ought to be better trained than this. There should be an obvious single document to read first, which makes sense of the rest. A primer. She hears a voice calling her name, recognizing it as her own. She moves around the table until she finds the laptop making the noise. There's a video playing, apparently recorded on the laptop's own camera in this room. The Marion Wheeler in the video is seated and looks unfamiliar in a way which takes the one watching a moment to put her finger on. Not exhausted, not sick, not physically injured. She's seen herself that way before, in the mirror. This woman's willpower is gone. She's beaten. The laptop Marion says that she's guessed already that SCP-3125 is not in this room. In fact, this is the only room in the world where SCP-3125 is not present. It's called inverted containment. SCP-3125 pervades all of reality except for volumes which have been specifically shielded from its influence. This is it. This is their only safe harbor. This room represents the length and breadth of the war. Every competent antimemetics research project finds SCP-3125's fingerprints sooner or later. It manifests all over the world, in thousands of different forms. Most of them aren't even anomalous. Some of them they already have cataloged separately in the main database. A very small number of them are even in containment. Impossibly virulent cults, broken arithmetic, invisible spiders as tall as skyscrapers, people born with extra organs which nobody can see. That's the raw data. Those manifestations are troublesome enough to deal with in their own right. The Marion in the video casts around, picks up a bright green felt-tip pen and a blank piece of paper. She begins drawing a shape which isn't visible from the camera's perspective while still talking. Once you get a little further down the road, you start to see a pattern emerging in the data. You need to have the training in memetic science, but once you have that training and you have the data in front of you, it only takes a little extra effort to arrange those data points in conceptual space and draw a contour through them. Those data points are points on SCP-3125's hull. Those manifestations are the shadows it casts on our reality. You link 4 or 5 different SCPs together into a single shape, and you see it. And it sees you. She's still drawing. It's detailed. She doesn't look up, and her tone of voice is distant, almost as if she's narrating the tail end of a frightening children's story. When that happens, when you make eye contact, it kills you. It kills you, and it kills anybody who thinks like you. Physical distance doesn't matter. It's about mental proximity. Anybody with the same ideas, anybody in the same headspace. It kills your collaborators, your whole research team. It kills your parents. It kills your children. You become absent humans. human-shaped shells surrounding holes in reality. And when it's done, your project is a hole in the ground, and nobody knows what SCP-3125 is anymore. It is a black hole in antimemetic science, consuming unwary researchers and yielding no information, only detectable through indirect observation. A true description of what SCP-3125 is, or even an allusion to what it is, constitutes a containment breach and a lethal indirect cognitohazard. It's a defense mechanism. This information-swallowing behavior is just the outer layer, the poison coating. It protects the entity from discovery while it infests our reality. And as years pass, the manifestations will continue, growing denser and knitting together until the whole world is drowning in them, and everybody will be screaming, "Why did nobody realize what was happening?" And nobody will answer, because everybody who realized was killed by this system. Marion is at the core of Foundation Antimemetic science. She had all the raw data readily accessible. There are extensive written calculations on the walls, but she doesn't need to read them. She can do them in her head. All it took was that slightest push, that slightest suggestion. Staring through the laptop screen, eyes wide and defocused, she understands how it all links together. She sees SCP-3125. She feels dwarfed by it. She's encountered terrible, powerful ideas before, at every level of memeticity, and subdued them or even recruited them. But what she's picturing now is on another order of magnitude from what she knew to be possible. Now that she knows it's there, she can feel it like cosmic radiation, boring holes in the world with its thousands of manifestations, and freely laying waste to anybody who recognizes the larger pattern. It's not of reality, not of humanity. It is from a higher, worse place, and it is descending. The other Marion presents her finished diagram. She has drawn a mutated, fractally complex grasping hand with five-fold symmetry. It has no wrist or arm, just 5 long human fingers pointing in 5 directions. At its core, there is a pentagonal opening which could be a mouth. But the diagram was already there. It's plastered across the wall in the background of the video, plain as day, a meticulous collage in green, easily 2 meters in diameter, and showing the same meme complex to 100 times the level of detail. There are smaller diagrams of different elevations arrayed around it like spores, and its arms are spread wide around the seated Marion, who sits directly in front of the mouth, with her back to it. She does not realize this, and does not turn around. The Marion in the video asks how you fight an enemy without ever discovering it exists. How do you win without even realizing you're at war? What do they do? 7 years ago, there were more than 400 antimemetics research groups worldwide. Government agencies, military branches, private corporations, university projects. Many of them were groups of interest or subdivisions of groups of interest. They were allied with most of them. They were at the spearhead of an anti-memetics coalition which spanned the whole globe and thousands upon thousands of people. None of those groups still exist. The last one ceased to exist sometime in the last 72 hours. 3 years ago, Foundation Antimemetics was an organization of more than 4,000 people. Now it's 90. There's no war. They've lost the war. It's over. This is the mopping up operation. The only reason they still exist at all is because they have better amnestic biochemistry than anybody else in the world. Because that's all you can do when you see SCP-3125. Run away and try to forget what you saw. Seek oblivion in chemicals, or alcohol, or head trauma. And even that can't work every time. It's circling in. They meet it over and over again, and they don't realize it. There's no way they can stop themselves from rediscovering it. They're too damned smart. She points at something on the wall, out of view of the laptop's camera. Marion, watching, turns to look. In an upper corner of the room, there is a constellation of dizzyingly complicated schematics. Bart Hughes' initials are on every page. There's a machine they could build, Marion says. All it would take is 8 years, a lab as big as West Virginia, and all the money in the world. Nothing that the O5 Council would blink at if they went to them. But how do we build that machine without any of them realizing what it's for? It would be like building and launching Apollo 11 without a single engineer deducing that the moon existed. The logistics would be insane, but the secrecy would be well past impossible. Someone would start asking questions, and then it would be over. So what do? Marion, in the room, says find another way. The fatalistic tone of voice makes her angry, and she asks what the hell's wrong with her. The video Marion says that she could tell everybody to walk away. She could send a little message to herself saying, "There's danger down this road. You should disband the Antimemetics division and pursue other projects." But she'd be suspicious. She'd start asking questions, and then it would be over. Marion is now crouched in front of the video, trying to understand what she's watching. She asks what's wrong, and if she's okay. The recording continues, saying that she could kill herself in here, but the team would find SCP-3125 without her, and then they'd have to fight 3125 without her. It's going to happen soon, whatever happens. In the next 2 months at most. This year it will be over. She may die in here anyway. She's on so many nestic drugs that her endocrine system is shutting down. Taking amnestics at the same time is the chemical equivalent to trepanation. She doesn't remember the last time she slept without having a nightmare about Adam, and she's starting to forget whether SCP-4987 is a real thing or just the number that she gave to her life. Marion, in the room, says that she's not like this. She's stronger than this. What happened to her? Who's Adam? The video Marion says that she doesn't know how they survive this. She doesn't know how they win. They're the last ones in the world. After them, there's nobody. Marion shakes her head, not believing it. Video Marion says that she's done. She's going to walk out of this door and forget who she is, and then she's going to be her, and she'll have to figure out a way out of this, because she can't. She gets up and moves off screen. She can be heard breathing deeply, and her speech is starting to distort. She says that her eyes hurt, and she thinks Iller starting inf Malawi inside. There's the sound of a door opening, and then a piercing pulse of sound and light, which terminates the recording. Marion stares at the dark screen for a long minute. She's never seen herself so weak, and it damages her ego a great deal to see that it's possible. She feels disconnected from what she saw, like it happened in an alternate universe. She feels revulsed and appalled by that version of her, more so to know that that version is still inside her somewhere. It doesn't make sense. She's looking at all of the same facts. What made her give up? What did she know that she doesn't? Who was Adam? The answer to this question is so obvious and sickening that she instinctively distrusts it. She circles around the answer, probing it, trying to find reasons to reject it, but it's inescapable. Adam was someone she knew when the video was recorded, now completely removed from her memory. Adam was someone the thought of whose safety paralyzed her with fear. Someone in the same headspace. Someone she couldn't bear to lose. And then she lost. But how'd the room get built in the first place? Anybody's guess. She imagines Hughes building it as a proof of concept, followed by a cascading series of lucky chances which led to it becoming the war room. Someone discovered SCP-3125 at random while sealed in the room. They wrote notes to themselves which set up the skeletal external SCP database entry and the containment procedures. Most of the paperwork and computer hardware was left behind by later visitors. It could have happened. But what if there's another room? Unbidden, a cute factoid comes back to her right then. Site-41 is almost completely vacant. In particular, 200 meters below Site-41, there's an empty heavy engineering lab, an underground complex the size of a hockey stadium. Nobody has entered it in living memory. Built who knows how many decades back by a dead generation of antimemeticists. What if that's where they built their weapon? Does she really believe she's that smart? That her team and her had that much foresight? That they got that lucky? She turns to look at the airlock, running the numbers in her head. Antimemetics Division staff, other than her, 38. 42 days until the next iteration. That's past the end of the year. It'll be too late. If she leaves this room now, she'll never be back. The plan she has now is the best plan there's ever going to be. They're the last ones in the world. After them, there's nobody. Kim is so deeply buried in work at his terminal, and the airlock is so quiet that he almost doesn't notice when it starts to cycle open again. He begins to say that they need to check her for notes, but then he sees that Marion is curled up in the bottom of the narrow cylinder, panting as though she just finished a marathon run. Kim holds a hand out, but she shakes her head, electing to stay lying down, knees bent up to her chest, sucking down lungfuls of air. He asks what in the world happened in there, but she just gasps that she needs to breathe. She'll be okay in a second, and she thinks she blacked out for a moment. She thinks she's okay. She remembers the plan. Kim looks confused and worried for a second, then says that she shouldn't be able to remember anything. What did she do? Marion replies that she hit her head, then goes back to concentrating on breathing properly. She suddenly becomes acutely aware that Kim has her effectively cornered. Disliking this configuration for reasons which she's only gradually putting back together, she levers herself up to one shoulder and tries to stand. Kim puts a hand on her shoulder and pushes her back down, telling her that she looks terrible. He says that there's something in'll fleth her neck. He points at her throat, then taps the same spot on his own. He says that he neth hly she's been infected by whatever was in there. They need to act quickly. He reaches for his keyring and unthreads a Swiss Army knife, unfolding a short, gleaming blade. He does this in such a methodical, ordinary way that Marion almost forgets to react when he leans down towards her to cut her throat. Almost. She grips his wrist. They're locked like that for a moment, a tableau. She looks into Paul Kim's eye, but it isn't his eye anymore. She squints, wondering if she's making eye contact with anything but a hole in space. She already feels the force bearing down on her own skull, trying to drill into it, but she knows its shape, and that means she can hold out, maybe for a few minutes. She had hoped, prayed, that Kim would not succumb so quickly. And in a crazed little way, she thought there would at least be a sign, a theatrical doubling over as his mind was wrenched out of its socket. Kim's wrist spasms as he tries to lunge with the knife. Marion parries, and its tip glances off the airlock interior wall with a screech. They scuffle for an awkward second, then she boots him in the stomach with both feet, sending him sprawling in the antechamber. She launches out of the airlock, dives over him, and sprints away from the containment unit. She feels SCP-3125 following her as she runs, like a spotlight. She hears a crash in another part of the site as the first piece of ceiling caves in. Chapter 5. Your Last First Day. Marion is curled up in the corner of Site-41's main freight elevator, descending, clutching a shiny red ray gun almost as long as she is tall. The gun has a two-tined prong instead of a barrel, and its stock is a weirdly asymmetrical mass of pipework, more like a Swiss watch or a small intestinal tract than a weapon. The gun is SCP-7381, and it comes from a long-dead planet. Not too distant a planet, when all's said and done, which conventional astronomy has yet to observe. A tornado of violence and destruction is tearing through Site-41, and through the minds of everybody working at Site-41. Ceilings are being brought down. The site pharmacy is a sucking hole at the side of the building. The armory is buried. That's why she had to go through Area 09 and is now toting anomalous weaponry instead. The Antimemetics Division operatives she meets in the corridors are all broken. Some of them curled up and raving while their minds evaporate and they die one memory at a time. Some infected with a collection of ideas which compel them to shout guttural phrases in strange languages and to procure blades, never guns, and work on those demented victims, and each other, and themselves. Marion doesn't recognize any of the people. Their faces are all wrong, torn up with hatred and misery and vindictive glee. She's been trying to avoid fighting, but she's had to kill one man in self-defense. Fired at his heart, SCP-7381 simply erased a half-meter-wide cylinder of matter, removing his upper torso and lower jaw. He fell to the ground in 4 pieces. SCP-7381's beam is invisible, silent, and recoilless. It was like using a child's toy gun. Marion is petrified, but more than that, angry. "This is too much," she says out loud, willing her heart rate back under control. She can't deal with this. She shouldn't have to deal with this. It's her first day. But how much sense does that make? Marion studies her reflection in the dark glass of the elevator control panel, and she tours the interior of her own skull, examining her thought processes. There are hints there, which would be difficult to articulate to someone who didn't know her as well as she knows herself. She isn't thinking like a newbie. She's instinctively breaking the problem apart, the way an experienced Foundation operative should. Hell, a newbie wouldn't even know how to carry out a detailed psychological self-examination of this kind. A newbie wouldn't even think of it. A newbie would just suffocate. The first thing it did when it saw her, she explains to her reflection, was eat everything she knew about the division, and everything she knew about it. If she had a plan, it ate the plan, but she's still herself, so she can come up with that plan again. It's already right in front of her. She just needs to see it. If she were her, what would her plan have been? She scratches absently at her left wrist. Taking some hardcore nestic drugs would have been a smart first step, she guesses, reinforcing her mind so that it can't erase the rest of the steps. The nearest source of nestic medicine is in the site pharmacy, but it's already been destroyed, and in any case the elevator is headed down, away from it. She thinks to herself to stop, though. How does she know that the pharmacy has been destroyed? Well, because she was there. She remembers finding the pharmacist crushed to death beneath a fallen medical cabinet, her skull an unrecognizable splatter of scarlet. She remembers the floor being torn away beneath her feet, and only barely making it out of that portion of the building alive. She remembers a modular package colored safety orange, with an enormous black Z on it. Her heart nearly stops at this. What did she do? She remembers the dozens of warning signs covering the package. She remembers the 3-factor authorization procedure she had to follow to get into the sealed container where it was stored. She remembers the centimeter-thick book of medical advisory information which she discarded. And rolling her left sleeve back, she finds a fresh needle mark with a speck of blood, and remembers administering the injection. This was her plan? This is what it takes to fight SCP-3125? She's killed herself. Class Z nestics are the last word in biochemical memory fortification. Class Z nestics permanently destroy the subject's ability to forget. The result is a perfect eidetic memory and perfect immunity to arbitrarily strong antimemetic interference. The dose is taking effect now. Marion didn't read the book because she already knew every word of it. She knows everything that's about to happen to her. She can already feel her mind hardening like steel and the developing symptoms of extreme sensory overload. She can see everything. There are extra buttons on the elevator control panel, the lowest of which, the 30th floor below ground level, she somehow already pushed. The walls of the elevator are covered with graffiti scrawled by the desperate and dying, people whose conceptual presence was eradicated from reality years earlier by the Aleister Gray antimemetic kill agent, reducing them to the level of ghosts. In one corner of the freight elevator, there's even a half corpse, unidentifiable. So many layers removed from reality that not even flies can smell it, its cells winking out of existence asymptotically over the course of years. There is a fistful of tiny white worms exploring the floor of the elevator car, near where she's sitting. Revolted, Marion shuffles back from them, shaking one or two more of them out of her hair. The worms are among the most widespread and successful antimemetically cloaked organisms in the world. They are everywhere, in every biome, in every room. She can hear a long, alarming drone noise, a continual roaring which has the texture of ambient noise and is continually getting louder. It's as if it's been there for her entire life, and it's only now that she's begun to hear it. It's too much data, too much sound, too much light. Having her eyes open is like jamming them full of needles. She clamps her hands over her ears and screws her eyes up. Even like this, she feels the vibration of the elevator's slow descent and the heat of the failed air conditioning and the movement of her clothes on her skin, and meanwhile her vision is flooding instead with what could be hallucinations. The human sensorium routinely generates huge amounts of data, and the human brain is adapted to discard almost all of that data nearly immediately. Altering the brain's behavior to retain that data is extremely dangerous, even for very short time spans. Marion takes one hand away from her ear for just long enough to punch the metal wall of the elevator car, bloodying two knuckles. The pain gives her a focal point, a memory which screams a little louder than the rest. And she finds the plan. She doesn't remember it. She bootstraps it from first principles in a handful of minutes, just like she's done 100 times before. "I know how to beat you," she says. "No," SCP-3125 says to her. "You don't." The elevator stops at the 30th floor below ground, and its doors grind open. They wait, open, for a long time. Further up the elevator shaft, there are the distant rumbles of more parts of Site-41 being reduced to crumbs. Still crouched in the corner, she mutters that SCP-3125 doesn't have a voice. "Of course it does," it replies. She states that SCP-3125 is a 5-dimensional anomalous metastasized mass of bad memes and bad anti-memes and everything in between, seeping through to our physical reality. It isn't coherent, and it isn't intelligent. It can't communicate. This is an auditory hallucination. SCP-3125 scoffs and replies that what it hates most about her is that she's consistently, eternally wrong, and yet she's still alive. All those lost battles, every year of that entire lost war, but somehow she always cobbles together enough dumb luck to walk away unscathed. The eternal sole survivor. She doesn't deserve that kind of luck. Nobody does. While it's talking, Marion leans hard on the ray gun to get to her feet. She lodges one shoulder against the wall of the elevator car, still with her eyes closed. She braces herself and opens her eyes. The corridor ahead is empty. There's an airlock at the far end, this one large enough to drive a truck through, built from ultra-toughened white metal alloy in Bart Hughes' established style. There's a panel beside the airlock. She closes her eyes again and hobbles forward, using the ray gun as a crutch, stretching one hand out ahead of her as guidance. Someone has to be last, she says, gritting her teeth. Someone has to be the best. Your team is dead, SCP-3125 says. Their minds have been pulled out like eyeballs. They're hollow people, with holes in space where their brains were. The war is over. Finally. It's just you, Marion. A division of one. Dying from nestic overdose, 200 meters underground, cared for by no one, known to exist to no one, up against an immortal, unkillable idea. Marion reaches the airlock and fumbles blindly with the panel until she finds the slot for her keycard. For a few seconds, it seems as if nothing is happening. Then a yellow light flashes, the enormous mechanical interlocks unlatch, and the door cycles open with all the fuss of a flower's petals unfurling. Noise, Hughes always held, is a symptom of imperfect engineering. Behind her, she hears the freight elevator close up and return to ground level, and she knows that someone has summoned it, intending to pursue her. Ideas can be killed, she says, as she steps into the airlock. The entity asks how, and she replies, with better ideas. As the airlock cycles closed, so does the hermetic seal. SCP-3125 is shut out. If something can cross over from conceptual space into reality, taking physical form, then something can cross in the opposite direction. It must be possible to take a physical entity, mechanically extract the idea which it embodies, amplify that idea, and broadcast it up into conceptual space. A bigger idea, a better idea, one designed specifically to fight SCP-3125. An ideal, a movement, a hero. The machine Marion needs to build is the size of an Olympic stadium, and she doesn't have a fraction of the heavy memetic engineering experience to do it, let alone the material resources or the time. But she knows, someone taught her, she doesn't remember who, that an Antimemetics Division operative is as good on their first day as they're ever likely to be, and the same must be true of the Division as a whole. She tells herself, they won this war on the day it began. When they encountered SCP-3125 for the first time, they built this bunker. Bart Hughes faked his death and sequestered himself here so he could work uninterrupted, while the rest of the division held on for as long as humanly possible, buying time for this moment. She knows this is what she did, because it's what she would have done. She's the final component. He's waiting for her. The space beyond the airlock is gigantic, structured and lit like an aircraft hangar and filled with hot, stale, dry air. Marion, still mostly blind, stumbles forward across an expanse of more than a hectare of flat, dusty epoxy flooring. She shouts out for Hughes into the void, but nothing comes back but the echo. She glances up for a second. The space is empty. The castle-sized memetic amplification broadcasting unit which Bart Hughes was meant to be building is absolutely absent. Hughes himself is absent. Maybe the entire machine is antimemetically cloaked, she wonders momentarily. It would be a smart way to conceal the operation even from the rest of the Foundation. But her brain is curdling in the strongest nestic drugs ever manufactured. There's genuinely nothing here. Almost nothing. At the center of the space, there's a small outpost, a group of trestle tables with tools and toolboxes scattered about the place. Parked behind it is an unmarked military truck with flat tires. On the back of the truck is a squat, squarish machine the size of a shipping container, with unshielded wiring and exposed pipework, and a long cable leading to a heavy-duty control panel on the floor. To the untrained eye, it is not at all clear what the machine is designed to do. It's the anti-memetic equivalent to a hydrogen bomb, the Division's answer to an on-site nuclear warhead. Activated, it would contaminate Site-41 and everything and everyone on it with anti-memetic radiation. There would be no Site-41, and no Division afterwards. Nothing any of the escaping infectious staff did could have any effect on the real world. It's the wrong machine. It can't destroy or contain SCP-3125, or even injure it. All it can do is sterilize today's outbreak. The other symptoms will persist. 50 or 10 or 5 years from now, or maybe 1 year, or maybe tomorrow, SCP-3125 will return, bringing with it its MK-class end-of-world scenario. Human civilization will be entirely eradicated as an abstract concept, and be replaced with something unimaginably worse. There will be no one to fight it. Marion leans there on the ray gun for a long moment. The pressure of information in her mind, continually increasing, reaches a point where she can't take it anymore, and she starts to break. The Class Z has been in her system for long enough now that she knows for a fact she has irreversible brain damage. There is no antidote. She'll be lucid for another hour, then spend the remaining 2 or 3 hours of her life vegetative. That's right, she thinks. It's almost a relief. This is good. This is right. She's survived too long. She forgot what universe this was. For a while there, she thought, maybe, that this was the universe where they win sometimes. The agony in her head is like an ice axe now. She drops the ray gun with a clatter, sinks to her knees, lies down and waits for either death or a better idea. A being superficially resembling Paul Kim arrives at the outer airlock door. It examines the airlock uncomprehendingly for a few moments, then finds the keycard slot. It hunts methodically through Kim's pockets, then remembers the keycard around its neck. The airlock cycles once more, and not Kim goes through. Behind it, the freight elevator is returning to ground level a third time, to fetch the rest. In the next room, the being which is not Paul Kim finds Marion, unconscious, with the ray gun dropped beside her. There is also a military truck which it disregards. Not Kim lets its keycards fall from its fingers and scoops up the ray gun. For a moment it contemplates the unconscious Marion, then examines the gun itself, remembering how it works. It turns back to face the airlock and fires, punching fat, cylindrical holes in the white metal of the inner door until it's gone, then the outer door too, breaching the hermetic seal. A faint smile returns to Not Kim's face as SCP-3125 and its familiar, comforting signals flood into the bunker. A dozen more non-people are arriving by freight elevator, former Antimemetics Division bodies. "I've found her," Not Kim calls out to them. It drops the ray gun where it's standing, as if it simply forgot that it had been carrying anything, and pulls out its knife again. It holds the knife between 2 fingers, in a casual, offhand sort of way, as if it were a pencil or screwdriver. The infected non-people gather with Not Kim around Marion, looking down at her with alien expressions of disgust, or pity, or malice. Why isn't she opening up properly, someone asks. She can't meet them unless she wants the signals. Start with her eyes, says someone else. It'll make the rest of her easier to correct. Not Kim leans down to start work, then hesitates, its knife a few centimeters from Marion's eye. She's whispering something, so quietly that only it can hear her clearly. "None of this happened, Paul," she says. "You and I never existed. There is no Antimemetics Division." There's a sharp click as the bomb finishes its powering up sequence. Nobody in the room can hear this but Marion. Nobody in the room can perceive the bomb but Marion. All they can see is an empty truck. The world goes black. Despite the seeming finality of that chapter, this is not the ending to this story. It's little surprise that SCP-3125 is the chief villain of this tale, being certainly the grandest and most horrific of all the antimemetic anomalies. It's a danger you can't face, can't even study without becoming aware of it, and as soon as you are, your mind is gone. Marion just saved the world temporarily by blasting the infected site with an antimemetic bomb, wiping all trace of them and their knowledge of SCP-3125's existence from the planet. But that certainly doesn't kill the entity. We'll find out the ramifications of this in the next part.